My teenage son, Mark, came into the kitchen one afternoon while I was putting meatloaf in the oven, and he began shuffling his feet nervously as he waited for me to set the temperature dial. He certainly had been acting jumpy lately. An enthusiastic student and a fine athlete, Mark has always been a quiet, well-mannered boy, and his edginess seemed out of character to everybody. How fortunate that we are planning a family vacation soon, I thought to myself. Mark really needed a break from his demanding schedule of schoolwork and sports. "Are you and Dad going to be home tonight?" he asked. "Sure," I answered. "How come?" "Becky and I have something we want to talk to you both about. Alone. Will you make sure none of the little kids are around?" "Okay," I replied. Mark probably wanted to take his girlfriend, Becky, on the family trip to Arizona. That would be fine with me. Becky was as bubbly and outgoing as Mark was reserved, and we were all very fond of her. Ever since they'd met in grade school, the two of them had been inseparable. Both were 17 now, and neither had ever had a date with anyone else. Becky was automatically included in all our family activities, and I had come to think of her as my fourth daughter. I didn't have a moment more to wonder about what Mark and Becky had on their minds. My husband, Jim, and I have 7 children, and every day seems to bring a new set of problems. Phone calls from school principals, broken dishwashers, angry neighbors, bruised egos, and filthy football uniforms. That afternoon, there was one minor catastrophe after another, and I even forgot to mention Mark's request to Jim when he came home from the office. When the young couple came to find me after supper, the little ones were already in bed. Jim was reading the newspaper in the den, so we all gathered there for our talk. "Mom, Dad," Mark began with quiet determination, "Becky and I are getting married soon." The word "soon" explained the situation to me immediately, but I just did not want to believe my ears. Mark was my second boy, and I had always had reason to be especially proud of him. He was an achiever, and success came easily to him. I just took it for granted that he would graduate at the top of his high school class and then go on to college and play football and study medicine. He and Becky would marry after they had finished school. In my mind, the script was written. "Of course you're going to get married, Mark," I answered, acting as if I didn't understand what they were trying to tell me. "After college. Maybe even in your junior or senior." "No. Soon. Next week. The minute we can," he said. By now, Becky was in tears. Here was the nice Catholic girl who sang alto every Sunday in the church choir, the high school cheerleader who rooted for Mark at each game. They were such good kids. While so many other youngsters were off drinking or smoking dope, Mark and Becky stayed home nights, making popcorn and watching television. Not that I'm naive. I worried sometimes about how exclusive their relationship was. And of course, I recognized that what the natural outcome of any close, loving feeling between a man and woman was likely to be. But how could they jeopardize their futures this way? "Mark, what about college?" I asked. "You got a letter from the football coach at the University of Tennessee just today." "Mom, this is more important to me than going to some big school and playing football. We're going to get married." "Oh, no, you're not," Jim exploded, his voice rising with every syllable. "What are you going to do for money? Anyway, you're underage. unless we give our written approval. Not in other states, Mark retorted, his face as red as his dad. I was terrified. Would he and Becky storm out of the house? Would we lose our son forever? My voice quivered as I interjected. Mark, when you found out that Becky was pregnant, they both winced. I knew I had struck a note of truth. A last hope. Suddenly, a last hope occurred to me. Maybe her period was just a little late. Taking a deep breath, I asked, Becky, are you sure you're pregnant? Yes. I went to the doctor last week. I'm over 2 months pregnant, she answered, stumbling over the last word. Have you told your folks? Jim asked. She came from a large Catholic family like ours. We knew her parents had taught her the same set of values that we tried to instill in our kids. We just left there. My mom was crying, and my dad didn't say much, she said quietly. How could you do this to us? I blurted out. Why didn't you use something? I know you learned about birth control in school. I couldn't believe how terribly petty I sounded. Yet, in my mind, they had not only hurt themselves, but all of us as well. What would the neighbors say? My family was the envy of our small town. Jim and I were active members of the church, the city council. My thoughts were racing. But as I saw the pain on their faces, my heart went out to them. These 2 vulnerable kids, Mark, not long ago a seed in my womb, and Becky, his childhood sweetheart. My voice softened with love and compassion. Mark, I said gently, we just want you to know that there may be other options besides marriage. Other options? What were they? Abortion was unthinkable to us as members of our church. How could the word have entered my mind? I had borne 7 children and even demonstrated in our community against the right to abortion. Was it possible then to give up the baby for adoption? Mark and Becky loved each other. Could they live together for the rest of their lives knowing their loved child was being raised by other parents? Could I stand never seeing my grandchild? No. Adoption seemed out of the question, too. Mom, we're not looking for other options, Mark said. We were stupid to get ourselves into this, but we never thought it would happen to us. I mean, we planned to wait, and then we weren't prepared. He blushed, putting his arm around Becky's shoulder. Well, Mark, I am glad to see that you're both willing to face the consequences, I answered, with tears in my eyes. Suddenly, I felt relieved, even a little proud of them both. Jim had calmed down, too. Okay, Jim agreed quietly. I just hope you know what you're in for. You'll need a lot of courage to get married so young and have a child. Mark and Becky were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony in the church chapel. In 7 months, Becky gave birth to a fine 8-pound girl who was named after my mother, Carolyn Mary. She is my first grandchild, and I adore her. Most of the pain and hardship is behind all of us now. I was gratified that most of our friends and neighbors stood by us during the most trying months of our family's life. To their credit, both Mark and Becky managed to complete their senior year in high school and have enrolled at the state university. Mark is concentrating on pre-med, and Becky on nursing. Jim and I, along with Becky's parents, have helped the couple pay their rent and college expenses, but I know they go without many things. Mark hasn't played either football or basketball since. He spends all his spare time earning money for his new family. What hasn't changed is Mark and Becky's love for each other. As for me, I'm no longer writing scripts or mapping out my children's futures. I've learned to let them write their own. I'm sure that makes me a better mother. It certainly makes me a stronger, more loving one.